I think it's okay to kill off characters as long as you've set the tone early in the story that this is a story where characters can die, which is all about, basically telling them, here's what you're getting yourself into. So, like, be prepared that it's going to happen. And if you're not into that, this probably isn't the story for you. But as long as you set that tone early, you're not going to probably get, lots of 0.5 ratings for doing so. Yeah. But I haven't set that tone within the Runic Artist, I don't think. Well, and so I probably can't get away with killing off any like emotionally important characters because I would not be delivering on the promise, I guess, that I've given in the earlier books.
This is the Crit RPG Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything Lit RPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Crit RPG Podcast, the only podcast that invites Spanish bodies of water. With me today is Ellake. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Happy to be here.
You're the author of the Runic Artist. You can check it out on Railroad and also on Kindle and Audible. It is already out. As soon as you fix the link on your Railroad, I can actually go and pick it up on Audible. This is great. But yeah, you can also Google it, and it's linked down below. But yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. The story's doing better than I ever hoped. All stuff better than I expected. And it's continuing on. Like I've been going for a little over a year now. Without taking any breaks, not experiencing any burnout, which was a concern because I've seen it happen to so many other authors. So I'm doing really well.
Cool, dope. Why don't you tell me on your story?
All right. So the Runic Artist follows our main character, Nate, who's a graffiti artist from Sydney, who basically gets thrown across the multiverse into a world of magic and systems, etc. And in that world, he gets a leg up due to obviously not being a local. So there are benefits, obviously, as is true with a lot of these stories. And it's really about...
And not in real life.
Not in real life, no.
Yeah.
Definitely not. So it's nice bit of escapism there.
Yeah.
And then it's about him finding his way in this new world. And it definitely focuses on his ability to marry up his loves, which is art and being an artist, with magic, which is why it's called the Runic Artist, because he as everyone will find out very early on if they give the story a go, he gets a rune-based class, and so he's all about preparation. That's kind of what he specializes in. If he can prepare for an issue, an event, a battle, etc., he's very, very difficult to defeat because he's very adaptable. But that's the crux of the story. And obviously, he makes friends along the way, tribulations, trials, dungeons, tournaments. I think that currently we're looking at potentially some war. So, as with many of these stories, exactly, it's like it slowly escalates, right? Like, you start out with your small town problems, then your nationwide problems, and in the end, you're fighting off the multiverse.
You're out there punching dread gods, yeah.
That's it. Absolutely. Cradle, love it.
Cradle, man. I'm in Waybound right now. It is very, very good. But
I think I just recently finished like my fourth reread. I'm reading Threshold, which is like the stories from the Cradle universe.
Yeah, like very, very good. Also, obviously, like a inspiration of yours, quite obviously. I do like though that you've gone with a class based system, because that you rarely see that these days. Like people tend to shy away from it and kind of like write progression fantasy more than lit RPGs. And even if they write lit RPGs, it's like less class based. It's more like, well, like certain skills kind of like put you into certain like class combinations ish. But why did you choose with a class system?
So I chose a class system mostly because I really love class systems. I'm a big fan of D&D 3.5. the system, obviously, and the whole concept of multi-classing, and how classes can interact together to create things that are greater than the sum of their parts. And I liked that aspect, especially the ability for like individuals to have the kind of agency to choose classes that didn't necessarily have to be, the optimal class, potentially just the class that they felt best suited them. So that was a big factor in my initial choice for going with the class system. I also think like it helps like define roles and limitations very well. So I thought that, that too many of the ones where it's like, they can get any skill kind of thing, you end up with someone with literally just a jack of all trades with very little cost for doing so. I'm not opposed to the idea of the main character being a jack of all trades, and in fact probably makes stories a bit more interesting, but only when there's some sort of cost to doing so. And so that was probably my biggest influences in my decision.
So you mean like a jack of all trade-off?
Sorry, repeat.
You mean a jack of all trade-off?
Yeah, exactly. Like you can be a jack of all trades as long as you can't be a jack of all trades all the time at a drop of a hat.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so like I do agree with that, because it also kind of depends on what kind of story you're writing, right? If you're writing like a very I'm I'm an edgelordy teenage guy who like wants to do everything on his own, then you need to be like a jack of all trades. Like you need to be able to do everything with everything. But it's also kind of funny because you have to like think about how does someone with that like very limited skill set then reasonably become very strong. But what I like about class systems that don't allow you to do that is that you have to rely on the power of friendship. And I do like writing about that shit. So
yeah, right. And like the relationships between characters are some of the most interesting scenes that I think can come up in writing. Funnily enough, my dev editor, he always makes sure he points out where there's been like an interaction between characters that he's really loved, and then at the end tells me I need to put some more in.
Yeah, I mean you love to see that happen, right? It's great. Okay, so what is the best advice you've ever gotten as a writer?
It's a hard question because I didn't get a lot of advice as a writer before I started writing, and once I was writing, because it was doing reasonably well, most authors that I talked with were just like, keep doing what you're doing, like it's clearly working. So just keep doing what you're doing, keep writing. Best advice as a writer. The best advice I got as a writer, actually, and it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Very particular, very like niche in terms of, I guess, advice. But that's that a funny character doesn't always need to be witty. So your comic relief in your story, if there's multiple characters, if there's just one, whoever it is, not every line that comes out of their mouth needs to be funny. I think early on, that was from my dev editor. I think early on I might have forced it a bit. I think book one had the most rewrites out of any of the ones I've written so far. And it was mostly in that first half of the book, and it was pretty much him saying, dial it down. It's funny if it comes out of the blue a bit. If it's every line, it's tedious.
Yeah. And a funny character doesn't even need to be witty at all. Sometimes like a comic relief character can. So I'm thinking about like Stargazer's War, if you've read it.
I read 1 and 2.
Yeah. Well, the third one isn't out yet. I really love that book. It's so good. But if you're looking at like, I forgot his name because I'm dumb and I read too much. But the first guy he meets, the guy who always loses in fights at the start, he's not witty at all, except for when he is sometimes. But the fact that he is not witty in like this like environment where everyone pretends to be super smart and like elitist, that makes him funny. And that's also cool.
The contrast, the
Yeah.
juxtaposition.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing as like a philosopher in like in the slums, right? It's this juxtaposition, and I forget who it was. I think it was in the comic Toolbox, where he writes about well, how to be funny even though you're not, which is a great title. And he says that I always butcher this quote, but he says that comedy is time and pain. And I never can quite explain what he means with it because it always changes every time I say it. But having been in a situation like that and being relatable to a character makes it 100% more funny, especially if you can kind of like be glad that it didn't happen to you, kind in the kind of way, you know? So yeah, or that you got over it, if in the case of telling jokes about yourself. But yeah, anyway, so writing jokes, that's cool, but also keep doing what you're doing is also good advice.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've really gotten out there from advice so far.
Really, nothing else. Like no one helped you
really,
ever.
I like really nothing else. And like, I mean, I've talked with a fair few authors as well. Like, I mean, obviously, I'm with Mango, as I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
So I chat with Luna Daya, who you had on here, Sarah Strains, who you had on here.
Yep.
Oh my god, I'm having a mental blank of his name. Alex Khan, Delicious Mates. That's the name he goes by.
Yeah.
All Mango authors, all I chatted to all the time. I've chatted to a heap of other ones as well. So yeah, no, that's
folks.
the only real advice that I think that and Selkie, obviously got to call Selkie out, Selkie Myth.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the major advice has all been just keep doing what you're doing, pretty much.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe I should go ask for more advice. Be like, all right, I'm doing what I'm doing. What can I do better?
I mean, like, if your dev editor is like happy with you, then just keep going. Like you said that you rewrote book 1 a touch. Like, how much is a lot?
So I probably, for the first 20 chapters, there was a lot of refactoring. I don't want to say like I don't think I completely rewrote any chapters, but I rewrote parts of almost every one of those chapters, recharacterizing the familiar, who was the issue pain point, and then even recharacterizing the main character Nate in the first few chapters. So that's probably the biggest one I've done. I got really positive feedback from my dev editor from about book 2, which was basically, maybe just tighten a couple of these things up. But other than that, this is amazing. I love it, which is good. And then book 3 was I've once again got a bit of advice, and it was mostly around this scene needs to be like a bit better, needs to be a bit closer. I don't want to throw in details because that'd be spoilers. But there's a couple of points in the book 3 where they're like, I think you could tighten it up quite a bit here. Here's my proposed fixes, which all good advice.
Yeah. That point where the love interest dies, that you might need to reconsider. I'm kidding. I don't know. I haven't read book 3.
I floated the idea to the beta readers. I'm like, look, how angry do you think the readers would be if I killed off a character? Like, I'm like, look, I see an opportunity here. I feel like it'd be a bit of like a heart wrencher. I feel like I get some tears out of them, and they're like, they're all like, look, you could do it, but I'm fairly certain they'll crucify you.
Yeah, emotional damage.
Exactly right, which it's an interesting topic because I actually got into it a bit with some of the readers because I'm decently active in my Discord, and I was like, look, I think it's okay to kill off characters as long as you've set the tone early in the story that this is a story where characters can die. If you don't, which is all about basically telling them here's what you're getting yourself into, so be prepared that it's going to happen, and if you're not into that, this probably isn't the story for you. But as long as you set that tone early, you're not going to probably get lots of 0.5 ratings for doing so. But I haven't set that tone within the Runic Artist, I don't think. And so I probably can't get away with killing off any emotionally important characters, because I would not be delivering on the promise, I guess, that I've given in the earlier books.
Yeah, it's about the promise, right? The promise you make at the beginning, and that stretches throughout the entire series. And you got to be really careful with that. So many authors, like myself included, just start out writing anything and then kind of forget that promise later on. There was even a game I was looking at recently that like completely changed its entire premise from like this bullet heaven thing to an ARPG, and was like, why? Why do you like? Why did you not? Why did you not just make another game? Like, what's up? But for the topic of like editing, I personally found that rewriting is much easier, because like whenever I have all these, okay, so my stuff is very tight. Like, it doesn't look like it from the outside if I'm doing my job right, but it is very tight. Like, sometimes I take sentences and twist them around so that they're like the meter of the paragraph actually reflects the kind of idea I had going on while I was writing the novel, the chapter. And if I change one line or one particular thing, then I have to like change the entire thing anyway. So why not just like scrap those 2,000 or 5,000 words and just like start again from scratch, because it's way cheaper and way easier. But yeah, I guess that's also like quite extreme, I guess. But yeah,
I'm not much on, like, I don't think I've done very big deletes before. I'll remove a paragraph here or there and then rewrite make some modifications to the preceding paragraph and the one that comes after, so it still flows. But
yeah.
I don't think I've ever deleted 2,000 plus words in a single go. I think the most I've ever done was, I think, 500. And it was a new chapter. I'd started writing it and I saw it was sitting there stalled, and I'm like, why am I not continuing this? And I reread it and I'm like, it's because I don't like it. I don't like how this is starting. Start again. But I think a part of that is probably goes into like the fact that I only write currently 3 chapters a week. And because I only do that, I have a very good idea of what I'm going to write before I do it, because I've been thinking about it for like the preceding 4 or 5 days. So when I sit down, I'm like, here's what I'm doing, and I already know, and then I'm like making modifications as I do it. But I'm usually, it's like you said, you're like editing a sentence, going back and adding an additional sentence in here, but I'm not like wiping out entire sections or chapters.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that does make sense. Not that it ever stopped me, but I do think it makes sense. Like, without self-deprecating too much, there's also like a difference between having a story that like really resonates with all of readers on Railroad and just keeping it going, and having a story that doesn't, where you're always kind of wondering like, hey, is this just bad, or is it the wrong audience, or like what's up, right? But that will make you a bit queasy, and it will make you rewrite more. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. People have been rewriting their books for thousands of years, but yeah, a different kind of writing, I guess, from like web serials.
Very different, I imagine. It's funny. I had a comment recently that was along that lines, where it's like they basically said that they feel like, even though I'm writing it like a web serial, I'm trying to write it like it's a book. So I don't do a lot of cliffhangers. In fact, a few times where I have done cliffhangers, I almost always, like, if it's a bad cliffhanger, I'll just be like, here, have the next chapter. Like, here's an extra chapter for the week, so you're not all sitting there waiting until Monday.
Let me check a Patreon.
What? Yeah,
Patreon.
You can hook in. If they were going to sign up for Patreon, they'd already have done it. On the opinion, like, I'm sure that like I could probably try and drive more to Patreon if I cliffed more often, but at the same time, those cliffs would also be getting the readers on Patreon at some point. So I don't know. It's not really the approach I take. Like, I don't mind there being a couple of cliffhangers in there, but I'm definitely not like doing cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger. Except in case any of my like readers from Discord watch this, yes, there was one period where there was about 10 chapters in a row where they were all cliffs. But anyone who was in the Discord knows that it was because I messed up, and had to go add in half a chapter because I completely forgot a scene that needed to be in there, and it just pushed everything down by like half a chapter. And so all of a sudden we're on 2-3 weeks straight of cliffs, and I was just constantly apologizing.
Oh no. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you. Like that's why I no longer have any such chapter length. Like the kid's already in the well. Like I don't need to care about my chapter length anymore. Like this thing is not going to be like the next Hero Fights and Monsters. So I just like write however much the fuck I want. I just released like a 7,000 word chapter.
That is, yeah. See, like it'd be interesting to try and write longer chapters like that, because I've never actually tried. Most of my chapters, like as I said, I set a minimum length of 2,500 words. On the high side, they get up to 3,100. They usually sit closer to like 2,006, 2,7. And that's pretty consistent. And yeah, like I said, like I can usually wrap something up within 400 words or so by that point. And if I can't, then it should probably not be in that chapter. It should be in the next one. That's kind of the approach I take.
Yeah, makes sense.
Can a team of has-been teen idols save the world? Find out in the new series Boy Bands and Dragons. When Neverboyland is sucked into a magical world, their reunion takes a back seat to staying alive. But if they can get over the past drama that drove them apart, they may find that even pop stars can be heroes. Come and discover your new favorite read. Our comeback tour is Slaying Monsters, the first in the Boy Bands and Dragons series by Kim Smuga Otto, dropping on Kindle Unlimited, October 25th.
Okay. Well, considering that no one ever gave you any advice and that was heartbreaking to hear, what is one thing that you've learned while writing that you would go back to and change, or that you have changed or would do differently now?
The thing I would probably do differently, and this is going to hurt you after our class discussion earlier, is I'd do a softer system. So the system I wrote is quite a hard system. I've got a Google sheet that like does auto calculations for basically everything, just so that I can keep on top of everything and keep track of it. And while it's like I like the system, it's very internally consistent. I basically completely came up with it, drawing on obviously inspirations from various other systems that I've experienced or read about in other stories. But given that I like the characterization side of things more, I would probably, when I write another story, even though I will still likely do more lit RPGs, so I'm not going to go into pure progression fantasy and but I would do softer systems. Ones that don't require as much internal consistency, so there's a little bit more room for creative flair.
Okay. Like, give me an example.
So, okay, I'll talk about one of my planned stories if you want. So obviously, okay, so let's talk about the Runic Artist system. So the Runic Artist system is very, very like internally consistent. Everyone gets access to 3 classes. Classes have a rarity. Rarities increase once you've got 20 levels in all of your classes. You can evolve it, and they move up a tier. And your like primary class is your whatever highest tier. Your secondary class has to be 1 tier lower, and then your tertiary class has to be 1 tier lower again. So there's all these consistent rules, etc., around that. Based on those rarities, they get certain amounts of stats per level. They get a certain amount of skills. So higher rarity class not only get slightly more skills, they also get more powerful skills. And then these skills like have literal calculations, because one of the things that I wanted to do in the system, because this was something I saw as a flaw in quite a few other stories, I won't name names, but stats becoming irrelevant. Like the difference between 100 strength and 1,000 strength was just, it didn't matter, right? It was like there was nothing in there that said this is why this matters. This is how much that does. So one of the things I did was I said, well, the skills should be tied to stats, because skills you can quantify, right, to an extent. Like if I tell you that this skill does 50% more damage than the base one, then you've got a rough idea of how much stronger that is than the regular one. And so a lot of the skill descriptions I have, that factor in particular stats. So the main character, for example, as a Runic Artist, his key stats mostly revolve around intellect and creativity. I didn't make intellect like in actual intelligence. It doesn't make you smarter. And I've spelled this out multiple times. So like it makes you think faster and it gives you a better memory, but it doesn't mean that you can it doesn't mean you can suddenly solve problems that you couldn't solve before, right? You're not. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen that meme, but it's like the dude's got a big head and he's like, I've got this like transplant or whatever, and it makes me think, like, it makes my brain much more powerful. And like, so you're smarter. And he's like, no, I'm dumber faster.
I thought that like intellect just gives you the ability to adjust your glasses extra smoothly.
I mean, no, wouldn't it be more like, dexterity? Because it's all about the manual dexterity and speed?
No, because like it's a thing.
It's that one, is it? Okay.
Yeah, like like on the side of the glasses, and then saying things as like me is intellectual. Like yeah, like okay, I got it though. Okay, so what? Okay, what do you do? That these make sense now. These stats.
So I do things like, for example, like so skills have skill levels, and the skills will have various things that they do. And some of those things may improve as you improve the skill level, but other things may improve based on your stats. So, for example, I'll give you an example. One of his things is that he can increase the tier of the sigils that he uses in runes temporarily. That's purely based on his intelligence stat. So it doesn't matter how many extra skill levels he gets, that factor won't improve if his intelligence doesn't. So all of a sudden, his intellect is relevant because his skill relies on it. And then by spreading the skills, depending on what they're doing across different stats, I can basically make it so that there are obvious key stats that influence his capabilities, and you have a quantifiable way of saying how much they're influencing them, and therefore where he might be better off investing his stats.
Okay. So very much like spreadsheet formula going like intellect times 0.3, like mana magnifier. Okay. Yep. So why would you ever do that to yourself?
Why would I ever do that to myself? Make a system that complicated? Because I like complicated systems. We talked about it a bit before, but I work in data. So I work with systems every day. I design systems. I love systems. In fact, in my writing process, I come up with the system before I ever start coming up with characters.
But I mean, at that point, you're just a head of data.
Yeah. Exactly, right?
There we go. Okay.
So that's the hard system, right? That's the Runic Artist. The Runic Artist is a hard system. It's very internally consistent. It's very easy to like say, well, this person is probably as powerful as this person, or so and so, etc. And obviously, opportunities, etc., are a big factor, and obviously talent. However, I do really like the idea of soft systems, and I'll use a couple of examples here. Cradle, I would say, uses a soft system.
Cultivation,
right? So you've got your basic rules around progression, but they're malleable, right? Like they're flexible.
It's. I think like these soft systems, like Cradle is not a lit RPG at all. It is a progression fantasy. And I think like that is exactly what progression fantasy is. You have your standard hard ruled magic system, but it's just not numbers on it. And like, yeah, he gets a bit creative with it toward the end, with like the whole like authority thing. But he does do a splendid job at reining that in by making the characters be aware that like just because they have authority over dragons doesn't mean that they can like freeze time, right? Because it's just too far away. Okay, but for example, for Cradle, you go ahead.
All right, so this one of the other series that I'm intending to write is a System Apocalypse, because I once again another of the subgenres that I love. Like I love little System Apocalypse stories. They're almost always fun. I want to write one where there's a stuntman from Hollywood as the main character, definitely going for more of an action comedy feel. But the system that I came up with is probably more reminiscent of like a card game system rather than a class system. So effectively, what I'm doing is creating a system where the characters can acquire skills, which take up a limited number of slots, but those skills cost energy. So I don't know if you've ever played from like Magic the Gathering or whatever in that, but you've got to you got to use energy to play cards, etc. And so the whole basis of the system is that the characters need to balance the amount of energy that they're producing, because that takes up those limited slots as well, with the skills they want. And that can be then obviously spread across passive skills like passive boosts, etc., to active boosts, and there's a couple of other little things in there. But it's a much softer system because there's no real stats involved. The system doesn't have any. It's basic. It's all based on the various, I guess, cards you've got slotted and how powerful they are. It affects your overall physicality, etc. And then as they go up in tier, they go from being very specific in terms of what they do to far more open-ended. So at the lower levels, one card might be like Fireball, right, which lets you shoot fireballs as long as you have the energy to do so. And then at the higher end, it might be something more along the lines of fire manipulation. So sure, you can still shoot fireballs, but you can, turn up the heat, shoot dragons out, sort of thing. Give yourself Phoenix wings, whatever the fuck you want. Because sorry if there's no swearing on this, I'm not sure. You can feel free.
Oh no, it's a European podcast, and I know you're Australian, so I'm prepared.
Love it. So it's a much softer system, right? There's none of these sort of hard rules around what they can and can't have in that sense. And so I just think, at least from a maintenance perspective and from a creativity perspective, like what you can do with it, it's probably a lot easier for an author to work with a system like that, rather than something that is very like hard codified and internally consistent, because then you've constantly got to be aware of, if I'm going to show an enemy's levels or their classes or whatever, I need to have an idea of how powerful that individual would be based on that, because the readers have the capability to figure out and calculate it themselves.
Now I really want to write a card-based RPG.
I've read a couple. So I actually we talked about Selkie before, and when I mentioned to Selkie that I wanted to write this story, when I went full time and I had the time to split between the Runic Artist and a second project, and he was like, "Sure, like cool idea. Go have a read of these card stories so that you sort of know what the other ones in the genre are like." And there's one I haven't read yet, but I want to give a go. Demon Card Enforcer. But
by John Stovall. I've had him on the podcast. He talks a lot about his system. If you want to,
I will give it a watch then, because that'd be very interesting. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how other ones in the genre have done it, because while it has essences of a card system, I don't think many readers, especially if they haven't played some of these card games, would get that from reading it, because it doesn't read like a card system. It reads almost like a skill system.
Yeah. I mean, all the skills is called all the skills and not all the cards, right? And I just had this idea of, when you're playing Magic, it's very hard to immerse yourself into the magic of into the vision of being a summoner, right? You play all these lands and you tap them, but what does it even mean, right? But translating that into the RPG, that could be really fun. On a scale where it's literally you own 50 lands and then you tap them and then you build something out of them or whatever. That could be kind of fun. But how would you set up the world building for that? It's lots to think about, but that could be fun. Definitely.
That could be an interesting story in that aspect. You just do it off ley lines or something like that you have to maintain control of. I feel like it lends itself, especially if you're going the summoning route, it lends itself to a kingdom build across Pokemon.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I would love to write a kingdom builder. You could even do something literally straight out of cultivation novels and or Cradle and or Way of Kings, where certain areas are very rich with certain aspects, right? You can say a swamp is full of swamp mana, obviously, and that lends itself to many poison cards. That could be fun. But yeah, I'll think about it, because what's most important to me is the story is great, the system is great, but what about the plot? Because I rarely ever build a system that isn't a meaningful part of the plot, and I do overcomplicate it a lot, but That's also why I'm trying to go for like more subtle, more fluid things. But I think that it might be worth considering not doing that. You could also do a rune system, inspired by Death Knights from World of Warcraft, where you had like at the beginning you had like 3 different runes, and then if you did a certain attack, you would use 2 blood runes and a frost rune, and then you had to like consider that. That could also be fun. Lots of things that could be fun that haven't been done before.
That's very true. I mean, so that runes one just sounds like a system that's sort of designed around having multiple different power sources.
Yeah.
Which would be interesting, right? Like, so, one of the other ones, stories that I guess you don't see done a huge amount is ones where there's multiple different types of systems within it. That potentially like compete with each other. It's been done, I've seen it done a couple of times, but it's not something super common in the genre. And so I reckon there's probably room for someone to write more in that.
Yeah, there's like I think Mammal has written one. It's called System Breaker, and it's kind of cool. And I do want to write one too, but that's a story for a different time. Okay. Speaking of like cool people, like what's one story that you love and why is it awesome?
I mean, I've got to say Cradle, right?
Yeah,
Cradle. If we can talk about more than one story, there's a few stories that I really love. But if we're talking probably like the one at the top, it's probably Cradle. I think it's the story I've done the most rereads of, so it clearly has to hold a special place in my heart. There are a couple others though that I'll probably give like notable shout-outs to. Red Rising, which is outside the genre. I don't know if you've ever read it.
It's been mentioned a lot.
Yeah, Red Rising by Pierce Brown. It's very well written. I don't want to call it a space opera, but definitely, sci-fi. I'm not sure how to go too much into it without like giving away the plot and stuff, but another amazing series. Within the genre, my favorites, these are the ones that I probably read the most religiously. Path of Ascension.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a big fan of. And who's another one? I quite like Quest Academy.
Brian.
Yep.
So yeah, like what makes those two awesome? Respectively.
I think because I like the characters so much. I'll say the Path of Ascension is probably the characters that I enjoy the most. So I like obviously the scale of the world that Mantis has created. For Quest Academy, it's probably the system design. So I like the way that that Brian's sort of merged the idea of superheroes, the concept of superheroes, with a lit RPG / progression fantasy, because I do think that, and keep in mind I haven't read a huge amount of superhero stories within the lit RPG genre, but I feel like it's a bit more challenging to have superhero powers grow, and in a way that makes them like still meaningful. Whereas I think he's done quite a good job, at least on that side of it. And then on the other hand, I do like the main character, even if I don't always like sort of his decisions.
Salvatore. Yeah, I mean, like the only thing I would say, like for Quest Academy, that I really sad about is that there isn't enough harem elements. Guy only gets laid twice in the first book, man. Like,
was it even
twice?
Sorry. No, you're right. It was twice. I was like, I thought it was once, but no, I'm like, no, there's another one that happens.
Yeah. Which is like to be fair, which is like more than any other RPG character gets laid, except for maybe Jason.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to fault him for that, and the reason why is that like my readers joke about the fact that that Nate, like if Nate came across like an attractive woman who propositioned him, he'd probably try and paint her before he tried to sleep with her. And they're like that's his priorities. Like that's the order. He's like, all right, art first, and then maybe some of that. But to be fair, I think he has slept with more than one woman or two.
Preposterous, outrageous, and absolutely cancelled. That's no longer like no. I lament the fact that like most of our readers are from cultures where that is like not acceptable, because when Brian and I would talked about it, it was like Brian in his wonderful, wonderful voice said like, I really pity you. What was your college experience like? And I second that. Because, like, did you ever go to college? Like, what happened there? But I do think that, like, there's a bit of, like, a cultural difference, because both Brian and I were very European. And, like, you can even see that, like, Australian stuff, like Shirt has several Jason has several relationships during the first couple of books, and then never again. Kind of like, oh, well, like, later on. But it's a bit difficult, I feel, and I think it would make a big step toward making the genre feel more grown up, and less YA. But I don't know. What do you think about this?
I can agree with that. So in the Runic Artist, I'm going through in my head, but I think the main character has had 3 relationships so far. 2 of them very casual, 1 of them more serious. And I think that's perfectly fine, right? Like, you know, people get to go in and out of relationships generally, especially when they're younger. So I don't see why that would be outside the norm. I definitely, like, I'm not a huge fan of, say, harem style novels. I suppose I should say I'm not a fan of harem style novels where the harem is the focus.
Yeah.
I always feel like the few times I've tried, all that happens is that they're constantly just trying to grow the harem. Like there's no point where they're like, okay, you know, 6 is enough, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm like, how do you even have time in the day? Like,
exactly,
because relationships aren't just obviously physical. There should be an emotional element in there, and I don't understand how anyone could be seeing to the emotional needs of like 6 people with any sort of, and still have time to do other things.
I also feel as though like it reduces, like, whether it's like reverse harem or like real harem, it kind of reduces the other characters to props, because like it's just like if my partner didn't have time for me because they were like, no, banging 9 other dudes or girls or whatever, I don't discriminate there, but like I think I would say like, hey, look, this has been like really great, but I need more time than just like Tuesdays between 6 and 7. Like,
no, exactly. And look, I have had polyamorous relationships like when I was younger.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, as you were talking about, were around the time I was in college, roughly, or in university, as we call it in Australia. And that was a huge problem. Like, you know, that, you know, you've got your time scheduled in, kind of thing. And I'm like, is this really like a relationship, or is this just a regular hookup?
It kind of like depends on what you want, right? If that is, but if you're interested in more, if you're interested in like spontaneity, and just in general like building a life with someone, then that person needs to be available so you can like actually build a really close bond. But if you're looking for, there's a wonderful German word, which is a very German word, that we know is a very German word and use it as a joke, and it is Lebensabschnittsgefährte. One word. It means companion for a certain part of your life, right? And if you're looking for something like that, then yeah, of course, Tuesdays between 6 and 7 might be enough, but what are you looking for?
Depends on the person, right? It depends on the person. And I mean, like for me, at least when I'm writing, I would prefer to write about the relationship that people have and sort of like how they progress or degress, right? Like, you know, how they start to fail and come apart and fall apart, right? Like that's more interesting to me than being like, you know, Nate's got, you know, 5 girls going.
Nate scored, yeah.
Exactly. Like, Nate scored, and then he's going to score again tomorrow night with someone else.
Yeah. So I think that that's actually the point that people don't like, or that's why they're so like apprehensive about like romantic content, because it invites this, all romance ends. love is finite. You will die at some point, and friendships end, right? And people, when they want to read a lit RPG, they do not want to think about that. Like, they do not want to think about like things ending. The numbers must go up; they never go down, right? So when you have like a love triangle or something, they always think that there is going to be that inevitable moment where there's like this heartbreaking scene, and maybe they're right, but I don't think it's inevitable. I think there are people who literally have a very good way to end the relationship, but it's also not something you just want to write about, because like it's kind of like writing like I went to go and have the groceries. So I don't know. It's hard to do.
It is. So it's funny you should mention that. I'm probably gonna have to write something like that at some point. So some point soon. So when it happens, I'll let you know how it went and how it was received.
Oh yeah, please. Like, let me know all the hatred that flows through your comments.
Yeah, I'll give you a graph of how many 0.5 ratings I get when that chapter comes out.
Like going through the roof. Numbers must go up. There we go.
That's it. Numbers got to go up. I mean, it's funny. It's funny because I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I was like, isn't that really like the same sort of thing that we see with like companies and all that these days? Like, it's like at all costs, the profits, the whatever must go up. Like that, it doesn't matter if we're already profitable. It doesn't matter if we're already making $2 billion a year.
Oh, you triggered me. Oh,
if we're still making $2 billion next year, that's we've gone down. That's not good enough. So the numbers have to go up.
It's problem
not just
is
an RPG. That's life apparently.
Yeah. I mean, like the issue is that like. So the company I'm working with right now, I specifically chose because they are owned by a foundation, and that foundation has one single purpose: do not let this company get sold. Right? Because, I mean, it's a systematic issue. It is not that anyone is out there being evil. Well, that's debatable. But if you are a shareholder in a company, right? And let's assume you're not like a multi-billionaire who can do whatever the fuck they want with their money, but like someone who like invests like hard-earned money into something for the first time. Now you have like 3 different companies. One of them gives you 2% return on investment. One gives 5, one gives 10. With like, and you're looking at it and you look at the risk and you take the 5% one, right? But then if at the end you do not get 5% return on investment for like a couple of years, you're asking like, hey, why would I do this? Why would I keep my money in here? Why wouldn't I go somewhere else? You get like 1% maybe. So you're saying, hey, look, I'm going to sell, and then hopefully you will not make a huge loss on the sale, right? Because the company is underperforming. But then that hurts the company. But you also, you don't want to hurt your own like people, so you have to like think about what you're doing. It's a huge dilemma, and I think that's the biggest issue, because companies shouldn't be able to be owned by people who don't work in them, because it creates a huge conflict of interest. Because that's how we get like these like people who fire 5,000 people and get a nice $200 million bonus at the end of the year. Basically money for betraying the contract. The contract is, you are our chief. When we give you the best choice of meat and mate, I'm quoting Simon Sinek here, and you go out there and you get the best meat and mate, but if the enemy is at the gates, you stand in front of us with your sword and your shield and you bash the enemy and you're in front of the line, right? But that doesn't happen anymore. Right now, it's you're sitting back there eating your meat, getting even like sending people to die, literally like making people go home and go like, hey, this like second kid that we're having is going to be a bit tough because I get laid off because my company didn't meet its arbitrary sales targets. Yeah. Like, how do you justify that to yourself?
You're describing the difference between a leader and a boss, right? Like, and that's
exactly
what's changed.
Yeah.
A leader leads from the front, right? Like you said, when the enemy's at the gates, they're on the walls, leading the charge.
A leader knows when to be at the front and when to be at the back and shut the fuck up. A boss doesn't. A boss always is at the front and says what the fuck to do when they shouldn't be, and is at the back when it should be at the front.
No, I agree.
So like that's like about as political as I've ever got on the podcast, but it's one of my pet peeves. Like because like so many problems in this world could be solved by people just shutting the fuck up and letting people work, and also not being so super greedy. But yeah.
I was trying to avoid using the word greedy in my description, but it was in the back of my mind the entire time. I'm like, how can I say this without saying greedy?
I mean, greed in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's not like a bad attribute as long as you know that you're doing it and you're doing it like with purpose and a good purpose behind it. But sometimes you have to think like, I make more money. Like if you were this person, I do not, right? Just be clear. But if you're sitting there on your Ford yacht and going, I make more money per second than like a middle-sized city in Sweden makes in a year, then like, why would you need more than that? Why would you not like? I do not get it. I mean, I get it. I understand. I'm a writer.
Go up.
Exactly. I'm a writer. I can understand why people are like that. I understand it. I just never want to be like that.
Can't relate to it, even if you can understand the thought process that might get someone there.
Yeah, I mean, like in a way, like I kind of pity them, because like it's because like I've talked to like some people who like got very very rich, out of like nowhere, and you're losing touch of reality. Like I have a friend who made a lot of money by being in esports, and he grew up like doing LAN parties at his like family's barn, and like organizing that. And now, like, he was like super chill dude, still is. Like, I really like him. He invited me to like his house on Fuerteventura. I didn't go, but I still want it. But he was like, "Hey, do you want in on an investment?" I'm like, "Sure." What are you talking about? And he's like, "Yeah, well, this is something a neighbor of mine is doing. The buy-in is only 100,000 euros." I'm like, "My brother in Christ, 100,000 euros is more than I make in a year. Like, far more than I make in a year." He's like, "Oh, right, yeah, right." And I talked to some other people who are like shocked when I told them about like, it's a bit hard, like balancing the job and writing and like the other like agents thing. And they were like, I can no longer relate to that. Fuck. So yeah, it's hard. It's.
Can I ask what
living is hard. What? Different. So he did LOL. He did Counter-Strike. So like chess.
Love LOL.
Yeah, LOL is great, or is great, and I do think that like just to tie a little bow on this entire topic, you know how they look at Arcane and go like, oh, it's been a commercial failure, like 250 million.
It's a loss leader though. Like commercially, it's a failure, but the objective wasn't for it to make money. The object for it was to draw people to League of Legends because that's where they make money.
No. Yes, you might think so, but the guy went up and was like, "We are basically a privately owned company. Yes, Tencent has a huge share of it, but we do not make Arcane to sell skins. We sell skins to make Arcane, right? Because like for all its faults, every big company has. Riot has like certainly not the best track record for like in other things, but they know that what they want to do, they want to make cool shit that people play. That's why they spend like 15 years on their MMORPG and nothing's come out of it yet, because they want to make cool shit like Larian Games does too, right? So that's how you do it. You make money to make cool shit, and you don't make cool shit to make money. That's different. Thanks for coming to my podcast. Or my TED talk, I should rather say, yeah. Was it as good for you as it was for me? Like it felt like this like very like smoky moment there.
No, it was good. It was a nice close.
Thank you. Speaking of nice closes, nice closes. There was a pun there, but give me some shoutouts.
Some shoutouts for other stories or
Yeah, I mean, just basically like I like it when people pitch the ball forward. So it's something that people who listen to this should have read.
All right. Let's go through what are my favorite ones. I think we talked about a couple already. So I love Plum Parrot stories. Cyberdreams is just the latest one of his that I've read. So I've read Victor of Tucson. I think Falling with Fall with Wings, which is the one that.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So love Plum stuff. Mechanimus, of course. So so Journey of Black and Red is probably like my favorite Royal Road story. But Changling is also amazing, especially if you like cyberpunk.
Oh yeah. Two things in here. I need to like advertise this again. There's going to be a Journey of Black and Calamitous Bob audiobook coming out soon, so you should probably look out for that. And also, we have been editing Changeling in a major way, and he's been busy doing that, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to come up with Portal.
Looking forward to that. So let's see. Those are the couple. I'm just trying to think of what other ones that I like read religiously. I've been enjoying William O by Matt Gonolicon. I don't know if you've read that one.
Oh, William O.
William O's. It's it's on trend for Matt Gonolicon. If you've read his stories before, he does like his wit and humor in there. But it's been very enjoyable.
I wish he would come to the podcast.
There you go. I don't think I've spoken to him, but if I do, I'll poke him.
Cool. Please do that. Thanks.
Who else have I read a bunch of recently? I'll give a shout out to Lunadea's Sil. Non-human MCs are not usually my go-to, but Luna's an amazing writer.
Luna is my amazing slimy bastard.
Yeah, he's very, very good. So get onto that. I'm just trying to think if there's any others. Like, I don't want to shout out any of the big names that I read because they really don't need it.
That's fine. I mean, like Mechanimus also doesn't, but just saying. But like, yeah, like Cyberdreams was a very good one. One person who's a friend of mine recently released his book on Kindle, and that's called Edge of Apocalypse.
I haven't read that one, and I'll give that one a go. I'll give another one then that's not like a big name, but that I have read, and again, leaning onto that cyberpunk. So Corpo Age. I don't know. So I think it only just came out like earlier, like a couple of days ago, on Kindle. But I read it a bunch when it was on Royal Road. So another awesome cyberpunk story.
Yeah,
there's a theme there. I'm on a cyberpunk binge at the moment.
Well, have you read Torchbearer?
What's that?
Have you read Torchbearer? It's not cyberpunk, but I
haven't read Torchbearer. Who's that by?
Me.
Oh, there you go. Let's go on the list now. All right.
Yeah, no, it's I usually don't show my books like this. I'm sorry, but it's a science fantasy story, and lots of emotional damage. Hopefully.
All right. Well, perfect. At least I know what I'm getting into. I'm okay with emotional damage.
Teeny tiny bit. Okay. And then like speaking of people who need shoutouts, like Matt Linneman, for example. Yeah.
I've actually looked, and I've been told off this before. I've never read Dungeon Crawler, Carl. I've been told I do need to read it before I start writing that other series. Because like I've told my publisher Manga Media the basics of the story, and they're like, look, it's not the same, but there's probably going to be some similarities drawn between the two. So you should probably at least have an idea of what you're getting into, so you're not being like. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Do my research, so I'm not being derivative. But I've never read Dungeon Crawler, Carl. Another big one that I've never read is The Wandering Inn, and I don't think I could get into it at this point because I'm just told that Pirate Arbor writes like ridiculous amounts, and I'm probably never going to be able to catch up.
Pirate is like another client of ours, and yes, they do write that much. They, I think we're at book 46 right now. So, yeah, it's a lot, but at the same time, like they also slowed down because they didn't want to get into burnout. So now it's only like what 20,000 words a week or whatever. Like it's insane. But yeah, there's some cool shit going on there too. Like we recently released a webtoon for it.
For
This
wondering,
webcomic. Yeah. So maybe you can catch up that way.
that's probably going to be a much easier a way to digest it than whatever the how many words are there over now? Like, is it 2 million or something? You're like,
Two?
that's on the low end. You're like
16.
Or like 60, yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, there's no way I'm catching up to that anytime soon. Maybe in my old age.
The thing is, like, The Wandering Inn is not a book that you read to finish. It's kind of like hanging out with friends. It's very detailed, very slow in certain ways. Very hard, like gut wrenching. It is not like it's really really good. But for the same reason as like Dungeon Crawler Carl, I have a hard time like continuing with it because I know bad shit is going to happen and I can't handle the emotion right now because I'm too stressed. But it is amazing. It is really really good. The audiobooks are also great, and yeah, we're still thinking about like re-recording the first book because the first book has been rewritten completely from scratch. Not from scratch, of course, but like has been rewritten to like be better. We had like a really good editor for it, and we re-recorded the audio for that. Or we want to re-record the audio for that. So yeah, well, now you can get into it. It's good.
Yeah, but Torchbearer first.
Said no one ever.
I said it. So
also right now it's called Genesis of the Sacred Machine. I think I might change it again into Torchbearer because it's just
easy to say, easy to remember.
Yeah, I mean, God Sam was fun because the main character is called Sam. But hey, all right. That being said, we can talk more about like my like little fiction in the bonus material. Do you have any last words for our YouTube viewers?
I guess that if you like lit RPGs and you like characters that focus more on progression and that are magic users, because I know that much of the genre is more melee to spellblade focused. So if you want like a pure mage that has no intention of ever picking up a melee weapon and hitting people with it, give the Runic Artist a go.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening and or watching, and I'll see you next time. And if you're on Patreon, the show goes on.